Right.
Okay. Sounds
Can
good.
we name ourselves hashtag Team Awesome?
Okay, so the recording is going and we're picking up from, I think, we left off at duties. We are about halfway done. And maybe. The first comment at the top of this was whether or not we should have an administrative handbook that outlines the roles and responsibilities of each of the officers. And I agree, we probably should, but that seems something to happen after the Constitution and the bylaws.
Agreed.
Yeah, I
Agreed.
agree.
So I'll put that in the bylaw notes and then sort of check it. And then Sarah, you had mentioned virtual conferences, and if we needed a conference committee.
I still think it's a good idea to have some kind of it doesn't necessarily have to be a conference committee, but like a meetings committee, or maybe we should keep it at conference, because the meetings, that can get confusing between like board meetings versus like an actual, big conference thing. Even if we never do like an in-person conference, if we just stick to all virtual, somebody still has to organize that, and that's not a one-person job, from my understanding.
No, it's not.
So there needs to be some kind of a group, and if there is a group, then should that person be what do we call it, what we call the people who aren't the elected positions, we call them like committee chairs. As part of the board, there should be some kind of a committee chair that is on the board. Who does that person then report to? Do they just report to the board? Would they be like under the VP? I don't know. I don't have an answer to that question.
I like organizations that tend to have sort of annual meeting programming under the responsibility of the vice president. And we can make it kind of open-ended, where it's a duty of the vice president to chair, organize, or otherwise solicit members of the annual program planning committee, or whatever you want to call it. That way, if the vice president wants to be the chair, they can. If they want to create a process for selecting, or people can apply to be meeting chairs, they can do that as well.
The chair, organize, or otherwise. What was the last part, Jay?
I think I said solicit, or we could say create an annual or a meeting, a program meeting planning committee. I don't know, whatever we want to call that committee.
Okay, did you just come off? Oh, you said that before, like off the top of your head. It sounded really good.
It's kind of what SFA does.
Yeah, it's also what RBMS does. So okay. That's where I was thinking of it from.
The duties of the president in their absence, overseeing the social media committee. And I guess maybe that should get moved. That's kind of a lot for the vice president, but overseeing the social media committee.
Could we, to be more general, could we?
I'm not sure if you froze or if I froze.
Oh, to be more general, could we say overseeing outreach rather than specifically social media?
Oh yeah. Is that something you think that should both the vice president should be over outreach and the conference? That seems like a lot for one person. Or is that just me?
I mean, that is a lot.
It is. Yeah, it is a lot. We could we put the president in charge of the conference? I think that's what SMA does. Yeah, it does, because the year I was the president, I had to organize the conference, which is how I know it's not a one-person job.
I don't mind either way.
I
Should we-
think that would work. Maybe if the it gives it you know.
The other option would be if we wanted to keep the VP on the conference committee, we could move the social media or outreach to the secretary.
Yeah.
I think
Question
outreach
mark.
could, yeah, our outreach could be a secretary thing, since secretary has to, I mean, it's kind of, you would think it might be like at least connected to the job. They have to take the minutes, they have to share. Like if you're just, disseminating information, you can see how the secretary would do that.
Also a nice thing to add to secretary responsibility that isn't just meeting minutes. Like it would be more
Yes.
attractive to be a secretary to do something else or have another duty.
That's true. Also true.
Okay. We're adding outreach to the secretary and then putting the conference committee back under the vice president.
Right.
Yes.
And then getting rid of the overseeing SC outreach under the VP bit. And Brian's comment about adding the duties to the bylaws and making the bylaws less rigorous to amend than the Constitution. Specific narrowly defined duties are procedural, not constitutional, and they likely require frequent amendments or updates. We could add a sentence to each of these 4 duty lists, and just say, additional responsibilities may be defined by the bylaws or the executive board on an as needed basis. Something along those lines.
Mm. Do you think like an overarching duties and responsibilities? Maybe further defined in the bylaws or position handbook, or maybe just or maybe just the position handbooks.
I think leave both. It's possible some of the things could be codified in the bylaws that could be more or less important as we go forward.
Okay. Should the president be the one to set up meetings? And should they produce the agenda? Yeah, I guess.
Well, because normally at SFA, it's always our secretary who's done, and when I was, it kind of has depended. In SFA, our secretary is the one who calls for agenda items and sends out the, or did Mary send out, who sent out the poll? I don't remember who sends out the polls for the meetings. Is that Luann?
Yeah, it's the secretary.
Yeah. But then in other organizations that I've been in, it's the chair or president who puts out the call for agenda items, gets the meeting scheduled, and things like that.
I think keep it as the president, and then however it works functionally, if they use the secretary to organize the call and share the agenda, then that can be something either defined in bylaws or in the position handbook, or just something worked out informally.
Okay. So we're feeling like leave it open instead of specifically defining it.
I mean, I think it should be the president's responsibility to have the meeting and set the agenda, but how the meeting invitations and how the agenda goes out, I think, can be open-ended.
Okay.
And then my next question was also relevant, and this has come up because we've had committees vanish because people stopped calling meetings. So one of the things that we did at my previous job was we set up every committee must meet X number of times per year, and then the entire board must meet X number of times per year. And we usually define that as like once a month, just to keep this from slipping off people's radars. So I think it might be important to declare the executive board will meet at least every other month, once a quarter, you know, something. And who's permitted to attend the meetings? Is it just the executive board, or is it open to the entire SEAA membership? Or do we want to have special meetings where the entire membership can join in, and then have, you know, maybe like once or twice a year, and then have like regular board meetings, however often we choose to have those.
Okay. I think okay, so first is how often should we meet? I think there should for sure be like a general membership meeting at least like once a quarter. How does that sound?
I think that makes sense.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
I think maybe the executive board should meet at least one, I don't know, once a month, once every other month, like what seems
Maybe every other, kind of twice as often as the general membership meeting.
Yeah, I think that would work. I mean, the SMA board only meets once a quarter.
I just realized I didn't share this. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I've got it pulled up on my other monitor. That's why I keep looking over to my to my right. It's not that I don't want to look at you all. I'm looking at the
I'm working remotely, so I have all of y'all on my iPad. So
I think
I'm just
for
listening
the
to you.
recording, I'm gonna go ahead and share it, even though it's been a minute. I'm sorry to later viewers, but I did think of this. But I feel like the board meeting should be open to general members, but they don't like have to be there. Is that fair?
Yeah.
They just don't get a vote. That's what SMA does, right, Jennifer?
Yes.
That's how I started showing up. I'm not too sure about outlining how many times a committee has to meet in the Constitution, unless we just also put that committees must meet at least like once a quarter.
or you could say committees well, should or can define their own meeting frequency and leave it up to the committees. Because if you know if you're a committee chair and you're expected to come to board meetings, it would behoove you to at least have your committee meet before the board meeting so you have something to report on.
Report to the executive board at quarterly meetings. I really misspelled that. At least once a quarter. The executive board will meet. Something. Okay, does everyone seem cool with this?
Looks good to
Section.
me.
What do we say? I feel like I should respond to this, but okay. So we left the like what committees vague. Like it's not listed just because I didn't really know how this could potentially balloon. Do we need to outline the committees or just sort of see what happens?
No.
See what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna say if we have any required committees, like committees that the organization needs to function, we could list those, but I wouldn't want to put limits on us in terms of committees that could be formed.
I'm okay with not outlining it for now. And I guess we could always come back to it if we had to.
It can always be a bylaws thing too, the process
Yeah.
for creating a committee and membership.
Yeah. And then since we have this on here, or on your notes page for the bylaws, we'd said no appointments. Then we have written in here in duties appointments. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there will have to be an application process to be a committee, but assuming that more than one person volunteers to be committee chair, someone has to make that decision of who becomes chair. I mean, so in that case, it is kind of an appointment, but it's not like picking someone out of the membership who hadn't applied to do it.
And that's fair. That's a good point, Jay. I agree with that.
Okay. I think this needs to be further defined, but or like if someone quits or like moves mid-term, I feel like the president should have the ability to like to fill a vacancy quickly. But you're right, this will need.
And that point can come up under probably nominations and elections, like what to do if somebody has to leave, partway through their term.
Okay. Yes, I would say the secretary is responsible for the maintaining the minutes. Yes. And the other part was agenda items and then the YouTube videos. To me,
Well, if the president's going to call the meetings, the president can call for agenda items or designate that to the secretary if that's how that particular president chooses to.
yeah, I think that's something that needs to be decided between each president and secretary. How they want to do it and like who calls for agenda items, who puts up the YouTube video, who sends stuff, like who, I mean, I don't think it really matters as long as it gets done. Does it need to be specified in the Constitution though to make sure it gets done?
Well, that
I
could.
think.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. I was gonna say, I think that.
We're gonna get in a mute off here. I was just gonna say, since we have this line of duties and responsibilities maybe further defined in the bylaws or position handbook, we could probably get away with leaving it out of this and sticking it in one of those two places or both.
I was going to say something similar, just that, we have responsibilities for minutes in the duties already, and then agenda in the president, or the meetings in the president, and it can kind of spell that all out in bylaws.
Okay. Let's see. I'm just gonna kind of click all of that. Okay, so this is a good question about state representatives, and are they also responsible for recruiting new members, interacting with their given states? At the risk of pushing a lot of stuff off to bylaws, I feel like this is kind of a bylaws question.
I like pushing a lot of stuff off the bylaws. That's what bylaws are for.
Yeah.
Besides, that's going to be Sarah's job.
Oh, thanks, Jay.
Okay, so for nominations and elections, so as far as who will be responsible for building a slate of nominees, I feel like this is going to be one of the committees that's going to have to get created every year, is like an election committee. And I also think people should be able to like just volunteer themselves, like self-nominations. Maybe that's, I know a lot of people don't like that, but.
No, I think we should have self-nominations as part of the nominating process overall. And in terms of responsibility, it won't happen for the first time, but I think after we have, or when we have a past president, that's a good duty for a past president to chair the nominating committee.
Should we put that in here, or just like we strongly will recommend that when that time comes? I'm okay. Actually, I feel like we kind of should outline that, because right now the past president doesn't have a job, doesn't have any duties. They're sort of just chilling.
So when we have a past president, they will have already done an annual meeting, so they can consult and support and on the meeting planning. They can chair nominating. Anything else?
Could the past president help out with advocacy issues?
They could.
I don't know if we want to put that. Do we want to put that in the Constitution though?
I wouldn't mind. I mean, it would position C to be willing to be an advocacy group. I think in more ways than just being sort of a professional org. I mean, I know RAC, right? RAC does advocacy. I know not all of the state orgs do. SFA kind of does, but not really. We kind of let RAC do it for us. So we could slip that in there and see where it goes.
Because this is this is on my mind because SMA is gearing up to do some advocacy now because they're about the state's trying to jack around with the state archives. We're not happy about it. So so if we had an organization like SEAA that we could call, as well as RAC, that we could call on for advocacy, you know, the more with advocacy, sometimes the pile-on helps. So if you have, you know, national, regional, local, I'll say all in support of whatever your advocacy issue is. And the past president at that point will know everybody in theory. And we'll have and again in theory have connections they could perhaps work on or work with rather.
I don't think I worded this very well for the advocacy part.
Maybe leading advocacy efforts.
Yeah, there we go. Leading advocacy efforts. That's good.
It's a lot better. Okay. So do we want to have like a, okay, so with the nominations, any member can be nominated or nominate themselves. That kind of gets us to the point of we have a pretty lax membership system right now, and that you basically sign up for the listserv and congratulations, you're a member of SEAA. Will we need something more formal if we're going to use that for the basis of nominations and elections? And do we want to add an additional rule like you have to have been a member for X amount of time after this first time?
Or maybe you have to have attended X number of meetings. You have to have attended at least 2 quarterly meetings.
So we have to, well, I guess that's part of the minutes would be to keeping track of who's coming.
Yes.
Okay.
Did we talk about at one point trying to put up some kind of a directory for members?
We did.
We did. If we did that, we can still do that. But if we did it as the basis of membership, we'd have to have, because that one was initially a public directory, so we'd need a public and a private one for people who didn't want to be publicly listed.
Right.
Which I don't think is too difficult. I think it would still just essentially be a Google form. Or something like that. That works for me. Does that need to be outlined somewhere?
Yeah, I mean, I'm wondering here, in any member of the association, if we're going to have any kind of requirements, just say must meet the requirements as laid out in the bylaws. So that way, you know, we have the exemption for the initial slate of executive officers, and then whatever the organization decides has additional requirements. I like Jennifer's idea of attending a certain number of meetings rather than necessarily a set period of time. I think people should be active, maybe necessarily rather than having been around long enough.
Yeah. And I don't think 2 quarterly meetings is an excessive wait period to be active in the organization.
And then so that was that. And then
Oh, this was Brian's question. Well, it was state representatives should be chosen by the state orgs. I still agree with that. I still agree with what I wrote. But does anybody disagree? And then also, does every state only have a single state org? Because that could throw a wrench in the plans real fast.
Well, Mississippi only has one. Alabama only has one. Florida, you have a bunch of regional.
We have regionals with just the one state.
Okay.
Okay.
North Carolina and South Carolina. I don't even know if they must have states.
What about Tennessee?
I don't know.
Are they part of this? I can never remember.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, this is why we have Google. All right.
Society of North Carolina Archivists. South Carolina Archival Association.
I just you beat me to that one. All right. Anybody know about Louisiana's not part of us, are they?
No,
And there's
they're part
Society
the
of Tennessee Archivists.
And Society of Georgia Archivists. So that sounds like everybody.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there's barely enough archivists in Mississippi to make one state organization, never mind two.
Let's say SFA is very heavily South Florida because there's a lot more of you down there than there are anywhere else.
Well, that's why we have two regional groups from Palm Beach to Miami-Dade County.
It's like there's a few folks in Tallahassee, there's a few folks in Orlando, Gainesville, and St. Augustine and Jacksonville, and then it's like South Florida.
Well, the Society of Northwest Archivists is heavily biased towards Seattle and Portland. Went to their to their annual meeting one year, and I'm like, wow, I think half Seattle seems to have showed up.
Although one year I did program planning with Northwest Archivists, and it was like 3 people from Alaska.
Aren't there only like 3 people in Alaska?
There was like 5.
Well, there's your 2/3 majority right there.
I think Alaska has a lot of government archives, actually.
Yeah.
I think that's what you find up there. There's a couple of universities I saw at least one Alaska university job go by. But they actually their university system just got gutted.
Yeah.
Last year?
That was over the last, I mean, it's been a process for the last 6 or 7 since we were up there. They started a program to reevaluate all of the degrees, and then since then have been unceremoniously cutting as many as they can.
Yeah. My associate dean at my former institution had worked up in Fairbanks. And she had been out of Alaska for quite a long time. But she still had a lot of friends and contacts and everything else. And she's big in the oral history world. And so she was hearing about all this from, all this, and she said, it's like frightening, disheartening, shameful, but not a surprise.
Yep.
Was her words. So.
Okay. So I just specifically stated that it's the job of the election committee to run the election. So that was explicit. Before, I think we'd said, or maybe I did this, to use the plurality voting system. That's mostly because I honestly didn't want to do runoffs. Which is maybe not great, but I wanted to bring it up.
What do we do if there is a tie?
Right,
Can
really
the president cast a tiebreaker?
Or
should
the past president?
or past president. Yeah, there you go.
Past. This is really hyphenated. Or have I just been doing that for fun?
No, you're right.
Okay. Well, does that mean that the past president wouldn't have voted in the first place? So otherwise their vote counts twice.
Ooh,
Mm.
good catch. Dang it, I thought I was being clever.
I guess a runoff will be held amongst the vice president, president, current president, and past president. Does that make sense?
So that would be 3 people to cast deciding votes.
Yeah, they'd get to vote again amongst the runoff people, whoever's in the runoff.
That's a good solution.
Okay.
With the obvious caveat that you can't vote for yourself. Like if you were secretary and you were running for vice president and you got in a tie, you can't vote for yourself.
Well, we're saying only the vice president, the president, and the past president.
Oh, okay.
So none of
Okay,
them would
sorry,
be
I
able.
misheard. I misheard. Sorry. My apologies. My apologies.
But yeah. Okay. Brian suggested making this more broad. Or I could just get rid of this entirely. I don't think it's particularly necessary unless we would like to explicitly say no mail-in votes, but that's only because we have nowhere to mail anything.
I think you could take it out entirely since you have the election committee will organize the election.
Okay. Okay, so then amendments.
And again, this is me probably thinking of things that are way too nitpicky for a constitution. But
This is a good question. I don't know.
Although here we have amendments to the bylaws, and if we're making amendments to the bylaws, wouldn't that be something in the bylaws for their own amendment process?
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
so if we want to amend the Constitution,
Right.
this question still applies. Maybe by submitting suggestions to the secretary X number of days before a quarterly membership meeting or the board meeting.
Yeah. Within.
Say membership meeting and then put the vote out to all membership for approving or rejecting an amendment.
What's a good, I don't want to make it too stringent, but like at least 7 days. Do I need to explicitly state that?
I think it needs to be longer. I mean, I think if there's going to be an amendment, it should be presented at a general meeting, sent for review, and then maybe voted at the next meeting.
Yeah.
So that would take almost 6 months to make any amendment changes.
Potentially. I mean, I don't want to make it difficult, but I also want to make sure that people have enough time and can weigh in on things.
Okay. So we're saying by submitting suggestions to the secretary prior to a general membership meeting.
Yeah.
Amendments will be presented at that meeting and will be voted on at the next general meeting after their presentation.
Alternatively, rather than having it be one meeting to the next, it could be presented at a meeting, and then after 1 month for review, an electronic vote will be conducted, because at least that way it lets potentially everybody vote and not just people who can attend the meeting.
Well, I
That's
do like
yeah.
that.
Yeah, I like that, Jay.
Submittal and voted on no less than 30 days afterwards. Can I leave out the electronic part and just make it?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
that's fine.
That's it.
And then I think the only thing we need to do to clarify the affirmative yes vote from C membership.
Yeah. Okay. And then I did skip something somewhere. So, any restrictions on state org leadership? I think we got rid of that, didn't we?
We talked about it last time.
I genuinely can't remember what we decided. I think we clarified this enough earlier. Yeah. Let's see. Okay, that's it. We're done. Yay.
Hashtag team awesome.
Yes, we're the best. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to stop recording.